Hey everyone, SunTide here. Hope you all are doing great. Today we are finally going to start talking about the skill Mind's Eye and talk about how genuinely interesting and fascinating and really good this skill is. Now, to be honest, I did speak on this skill for the longest time. I did not mention this skill in a positive light at all on this channel. Then I started hearing that a lot of speedrunners were using it against AT Ray Dow and other hard monsters, so I thought to look more into it, and honestly, the more I dug into it, the more fascinating and the better a skill, it seemed. I had this whole, story arc as I prepared for this video. But in that sense, I thought I would take you on this journey as well with me, and start talking about the Mind's Eye in 3 parts. 1, why genuinely it shouldn't be good. Why we should not expect Mind's Eye to be good at all. Then we're going to talk about how and why Mind's Eye might actually be good sometimes, the sort of surface level why we care about Mind's Eye. And then, at the end, we're going to talk about the deep Mind's Eye tech, why Mind's Eye is genuinely one of the best skills in the game, and when and why we might use it. So yeah, let's start off by talking about, what is Mind's Eye, and why doesn't it seem so good? So on screen right now, you can see its description in-game. Basically what it says is that your attacks are deflected less and deal more damage to hard targets. So what do hard targets mean? So if you're completely new to Monster Hunter calculation and damage calculation, basically every part of a monster has what is called a Hitzone value. And the Hitzone value is basically a multiplier for your damage. So every part of the monster has its own Hitzone value. So in this monster / training dummy over here, the front of the monster is going to take more damage than the back of the monster. You can see on the front I'm doing 28.7 damage, and on the back I'm going to do 7.2 damage with the same attack. So the hit zone is just a damage multiplier, and every part has its own value. And the calculation is genuinely pretty simple. So if a monster's hit zone is, say, for example, 80, that just means we'll do 80% of normal full damage. If it's 40, you'll do 40 full damage. So in the case of the training dubbing, we can actually change the hit zone values in the training settings. So in the training settings, when the height settings over here is set to soft, the monster has a hit zone value of 80. So I do 80% of my full damage, so 28.7. And if I set the monster to be hard, with a hard hide, then we'll do half the damage basically, because he went from 80 to 40. So we went from 28 damage to 14 damage. Now every type of attack can also have its own hit zone value. So right now, because I'm using the longsword, I do sever type damage. If I use the hammer, I would do blunt type damage, or a bow could use shot type damage. They all may have different hit zone values. Not always, they're usually pretty close together, but they can be pretty different. So, hard parts are just parts that have a hit zone value that is below a certain value. So, I feel like the best comparison for a very similar skill is actually weakness exploit. It's sort of like the anti-Mind's Eye. So what weakness exploit does is it improves your affinity and therefore your damage when a monster has high hit zone values, while Mind's Eye improves our attack and therefore damage on low hit zone values. So they sort of work in different situations. And so this is sort of why we don't really think of Mind's Eye as a very good skill, because in general, if we have a choice between improving, say, our strong attacks or our weak attacks, we usually want to improve our strong attacks. So skills like weakness exploit are, in principle, going to be better than skills like Mind's Eye. And the reason for that is pretty simple if you start thinking about the numbers. So basically, let's say, hypothetically, we had 2 attacks. We had one really strong attack that did 100 damage, and one really weak attack that did 10 damage. You could say our total damage if we do both attacks is going to be 100 plus 10 or 110. Now say we had a choice between improving our strong attack or improving our weak attack by, say, 10%. If you improve our weak attack by 10%, that's 100 plus 11, so 111. If we improve our strong attack by 10%, that's 110 plus 10 or 120. Basically, if we improve our strong attack strength, the overall damage we do is better. And so, yeah, basically there'd be no good reason to improve our weak attacks when improving our strong attacks is just so much more impactful. And also, why would we use our weak attacks when we could use our strong attacks? If you could just always do 100, why would you bother making this weak attack stronger, right? So, yeah. Also, the same principle is sort of why we don't is sort of why a lot of skills are actually really good. So weakness exploit is really good because it improves our strong attacks when when we're attacking a weak point, which already has a high hit zone value, or having more affinity. Agitator is very similar as well. So what Agitator does is when a monster is enraged, it improves both our attack and affinity at the same time, so they're sort of both making each other stronger at the same time. If they were acting at different times, it would be less good. That's also why in, say, for example, Monster Hunter World, we really like the still peak performance. Because when we were at full health, we were usually doing pretty good and doing strong attacks when monster was down. And, we were just having the monster being knocked down, so we do way more damage. So that's sort of why peak performance is good. Basically, we usually want our strong attacks, our strength to sort of come together and just be more than the sum of our parts, so to speak. And often, we can just ignore our weaknesses. We don't have to hit the hard parts of the monster, right? So yeah, in principle, that's just why we just didn't really bother with Mind's Eye. At least classically. Okay, so we've spoken about how Mind's Eye really shouldn't be that good in general. However, in Monster Hunter World specifically, Mind's Eye actually has the potential to be pretty good for, I think, two decently important reasons. One, in Wild specifically, attacking and improving our weaknesses is actually fairly important. And two, the numbers are just really, really good, on really, really high. Let's talk about the first one first. Why do we want to improve our weak attacks in Monster Hunter and Monster Hunter Wild specifically? So everything I said before is correct. If we have a choice between improving our strong attack or improving our weak attack, improving our strong attack is just going to be better overall. However, it is a bit of a simplification. So this is only true if we can choose which of our attacks to do, or if we're just doing like one attack of each. However, that's not always the case in Monster Hunter. Sometimes weak attacks can really unlock strong attacks, if that makes sense. So say, we're fighting a monster and you do weak attacks on the monster's arms. If you do that enough times, the monster could trip, and if the monster is tripped, you can attack the head and do bigger damage, right? So doing trips, doing weak attacks to attack the monster's arms allows you to do your strong attacks faster and more frequently. It's like that in most Monster Hunter games, but here and specifically, you can also unlock wounds. So if you spend less time creating wounds and more time with the wounds up, then you can do more damage once the wounds are there, right? It also works with part breaks as well in a couple of situations. In mods, specifically, mostly just Gravios. So Gravios has this hard chest piece. If you break the chest piece, you increase Hitzone value underneath it. So being able to break the chest piece faster can improve your damage as well. So those are the sort of three main situations where we have to use our weak attacks. And our weak attacks unlock our strong attacks in such a way. And let's talk about this situation, right? Let's say that we need to do 100 damage with our weak attacks, and then we can do 100 damage with our strong attacks. So in this case, you would say that, for example, keeping the same numbers as before, say our weak attacks did 10 damage and our strong attack did 100 damage. The number of hits you would need to do when the monster, when you can only do your weak attacks, is just going to be 100 damage divided by 10 damage per hit. So 100 damage divided by 10 damage per hit is 10. 100 damage divided by 100 damage per hit when you can do your strong attacks is just one hit. So we do 11 hits to do 200 damage in this situation. That's all I'm saying. Now, let's say we could either improve our weak attack or our strong attack. Let's say improve our weak attack by 10%, so now we do 11 damage on our weak attacks. Then we go 100 divided by 11, which is 9.1. And so we would need to do 10.1 hits to do this 200 damage. Meanwhile, if we improved our strong attacks instead, then we would reduce this second value by a slight amount, so 100 divided by 110, which means we need to do 10.9 hits to do 200. So in this case, if we compare those two, 10.1 is less than 10.9. So improving our weak attacks improved our sort of damage overall. We need to do less hits to do the same amount of damage, which is basically a damage increase, right? So bottom line, what this means is that if we can always choose a strong attack, we really want to improve the damage of our strong attacks. But if we need to pass a threshold with weak attacks to unlock a strong attack, then improving the weak attacks is actually a bit better. And that often happens in Monster Hunter when trying to go for trips, or part breaks, or boons. So yeah, there's a genuine reason why Mind's Eye can be really good if it helps you get those trips, or part breaks, or wounds much faster, and we were going to go for them anyway. So yeah, that's the one big reason. And the other big reason is just that the numbers are really, really high. So if they weren't high, it just wouldn't be very good. If damage boost isn't very high, then it's not going to be worth the trade-off. right? If you only got like 1% extra damage on our weak attacks, that's probably not going to be important. The other thing is, if it only works on very weak attacks, if it only worked on like 1 or 2 parts on different monsters, and we probably wouldn't want to go for it anyways. However, we're clear for both of these things in Monster Hunter World specifically. In World in previous games, it was less good, but here it's really, really good. And the reason for that is basically, one, we improve our damage by 30%. And 30% is a lot of extra damage. This also stacks multiplicatively with other multiplicative boosts. So for example, if you cart and activate Fortify and get a 10% attack bonus, your 10% attack bonus is also multiplied by 30%. So instead of having 140% extra damage, you end up having like 143% extra damage. 143% extra damage. On the other hand, it does not affect additive boosts to your attack. So it's not going to affect food bonuses, it's not going to affect Demon Drug, it's not going to affect Counter Strike. However, it's still really good. But in practice, it's not going to be like a 30% damage bonus. It's going to be more like a 25, 26, 27, 28% damage bonus, depending on how much attack you stack. Now, let's compare that to another skill, though. Let's compare that to what's generally the best other skill, and that's Critical Boost. So Critical Boost 3 is a 7.2% damage bonus if you're at 100% affinity. You aren't always going to be 100% affinity, but in the best case scenario, it's a 7% damage bonus. Compare a 7% damage bonus to like a 25% damage bonus. That's like 4 times higher. Mind's Eye 3 is 4 times better than Crit Boost in an optimal situation. Which is crazy. Like, Crit Boost was already pretty good, and then being like 4 times higher than that, like that's genuinely feels a bit ridiculous. Like, it honestly doesn't make sense that it's that good. But it is, like, those are the numbers for Mind's Eye. It's 4 times stronger than Crit Boost, okay? At 100% affinity, so in practice it's even better than that. The other thing is the threshold. So, in previous games, the threshold was really, really low. But in the wilds, Mind's Eye activates if the monster's raw Hitzone value is less than 45. And 45 is fairly high. Most monsters have quite a few parts with a Hitzone less than 45. Now, in contrast, Weakness Exploit activates when the raw Hitzone is equal to 45 or higher. So basically, Mind's Eye activates whenever Weakness Exploit doesn't. That's a simplification. We'll get more on that later, but I think that's the easiest way to think of it. If Weakness Exploit won't work, Mind's Eye will work, and vice versa. And I mean, look at it in the gameplay. The Training Dummy, as stated, has a Hitzone value of 40 when it's set to hard. So without Mind's Eye, I'm doing like 17 on a crit, 14.3 on a non-crit. So it's 14.3 or 17.9. When I swap to Mind's Eye, like, I am getting how much damage on a hit? 18.5 damage, which is just a crazy boost, even with a slow attack. My non-crit is, with Mind's Eye, is stronger than my crit without Mind's Eye. Like, it's insane. It's like if all of my attacks were crits, and I get crit on top of it. Like, just think about that. But that being said, we aren't just comparing Mind's Eye to no Mind's Eye. We're comparing Mind's Eye to Crit Boost, because we had to lose Crit Boost to get Mind's Eye, and also to Weakness Exploit, because it's stated when Mind's Eye activates, Weakness Exploit doesn't. So I thought about 2, sort of general average builds. So say, for example, one build has Mind's Eye, but loses some Crit Boost, because we don't have a slot. It has Weakness Exploit, but has about 70% affinity on hard parts. Say the other build just has Crit Boost 5 instead of Mind's Eye 3 and Crit Boost 3. Which one is better, in which situations, and by how much in practice? Okay, so if I use build 1, which has Mind's Eye, and I attack a part with a hit zone of 40, Mind's Eye boosts my damage by over 25%. That being said, I would still have to lose points of crit boost, so it's going to be a bit weaker than that. But how much? How much weaker is it actually going to be? So the easiest way to calculate that is through what I call the effective critical modifier. Basically, this is effectively how much your damage is going to increase if you take into account affinity and crit boost. And the formula for effective critical modifier is just affinity times your critical modifier plus 1 minus your affinity. Basically, this is how much damage you do thanks to crits, and this is how much damage you do when you don't have crits, and they just add up together. So, builds 1, which has Mind's Eye, has an effective critical modifier of 0.7 times 1.34 plus 0.3, which is 1.238, whereas build 2 has a higher critical modifier that goes up to 1.4, and so your effective critical modifier is 1.28, which is about a 3.3% boost. So yeah, basically your over 25% damage increase is going to be reduced by 3.3. So it's still going to be around 25%, but it won't be like way higher than 25% like it could be. Now, when we're attacking a weak point where Mind's Eye won't activate, our affinity is going to be slightly higher because we have Weakness Exploit, so it'll be 0.75 times 1.34 and 0.75 times 1.4. And so we get these effective critical modifiers, and so the crit boost build is going to be 3.6% stronger. It's a higher number this time around. This is sort of what I meant when I said like it's better to boost our strengths together. We're boosting our affinity and our crit together, so the net result is higher. But what does that mean then? So that means that accounting for the loss of crit boost, the Mind's Eye build is still going to be about 25% stronger on hard parts, but in exchange, it's going to be about 3 to 4% weaker on weak parts. So our best attacks are going to be weaker by about 3 or 4%, and our weak attacks are going to get stronger by about 25%, which is arguably a pretty good trade-off, especially considering what I said earlier about making it easier to get trips and stuff like that. So yeah, 25% stronger on hard parts or 3 to 4% stronger on weak parts. That's sort of the choice that crit boost versus Mind's Eye makes you question. Oh yeah, and just one more comparison. So if you're attacking a 40 hit zone with Mind's Eye, it's going to be a bit better than attacking a 50 hit zone with the same build. If you're going to swap builds for a crit boost build, a 40 hit zone with Mind's Eye is going to be a bit worse than the 50 hit zone with crit boost. Okay, so my point with this is if, say, the monster's head has a hit zone of, say, 55, 60, 65, which is fairly normal, you're still going to want to attack the head. Like, you're still going to do more damage by attacking the head. The Mind's Eye isn't going to automatically somehow make, like, the back of the monster the weakest part. You're still going to want to attack the head and whatever else. Mind's Eye, the whole thing it's going to be doing, at least by this, is it's going to make it easier to get a trip so you can more quickly and more frequently attack the head for the big damage boosts. Right? That's like the simplest explanation anyways, and that was going to be like the main core of the video. Some quick caveats. So Mind's Eye works on most attacks, but doesn't work on all attacks, so it doesn't affect bows, bowguns, or slinger. Even like the bow like slashing attack, when you use your aerial attack, it doesn't affect that. It doesn't affect gunland shelling, doesn't affect hunting horn echo waves, but does affect basically everything else, including Akuma's attacks and the Hadouken slinger, which I thought was pretty weird and cool. So, when I started this video, these were going to be my main points. So Mind's Eye could really be worth using if hitting non-weak points are easier. So if you were going to hit the monster's like arms instead of the head, because it was safe to attack the arms, the numbers make that a viable option. And if you have better damage uptime, that's good for damage, right? And Mind's Eye is also worth using if you're going to go for knockdowns on non-weak parts. So again, if you want to attack the arms to make sure the monster went down, you could attack the head more easily. Knockdowns are more frequent, and therefore Mind's Eye are better. Okay, now that was going to be my main point of the video, about how Mind's Eye makes your weak attack stronger, and that could still be worth it. However, what if Mind's Eye also made your strong attacks stronger? So right now the monster is wounded, and I do not have Mind's Eye equipped. I'm attacking the monster's wounds, and I'm doing 35.9 damage. Now, the hit zone of the wound is 100, so I'm doing full damage to it, and so Mind's Eye shouldn't activate, right? But now I swap to Mind's Eye, now I attack the wound, and I do 46.2 damage. So that was weird, right? We're getting this huge Mind's Eye bonus on, like, the wound, right? What's really weird as well, so I changed the monster back to soft, so I was doing 46.2 damage on the wound before, and now I'm back to doing 35.9. So when the monster is set to soft, the damage is decreased, so Mind's Eye is just ignored, which is so weird, but also so powerful, right? We're getting this 30% damage bonus when the monster is at its weakest and we're most strongest. So Mind's Eye improves the damage not only when we're weak, but also when we're strong. It just boosts the damage all the time by like 30%, which is crazy. So I thought a table would be a bit helpful. So when the monster isn't wounded, Mind's Eye activates below a 45 hit zone value and doesn't activate above 45 hit zone value. Weakness Exploit is the opposite. So Weakness Exploit does less, when the hit zone is less than 45, it has no effect. When it's above 45, we get some affinity bonus. We get like half of what Weakness Exploit's effect. Once wounds occur, then instead, we still get our bonus to Mind's Eye, even if the wound is higher than 45. And we still don't get the effect of Mind's Eye when the part was initially above 45. Weakness Exploit is sort of the same way. So if the monster is wounded, I think this is new as well actually. If the monster is wounded, but was initially a hard part, Weakness Exploit does nothing. Yeah, so Weakness Exploit is a bit weird as well. But yeah, so Weakness Exploit does not work on wounds if the part was already hard, but Mind's Eye will work on wounds if the part was already hard. And thus, Mind's Eye can be really, really strong on wounds and therefore improve our damage overall. All we need is for the part underneath the wound to activate Mind's Eye. It also has to be below 45 at the time. So for example, if we fight Gravios and we break the chest and they got a wound on the broken chest, even if like the fresh chest had a low hit zone value, because it's broken now, we have a high hit zone value, and thus Mind's Eye won't activate on wounds on Gravios' broken chest. But this does complicate things a bit, right? Like, in practice, if a monster's hit zone is 40 before the wound and 100 after the wound, we can't just treat it like 40, we can't just treat it like 100, it's somewhere in between. However, we need to know if it was 40 or below before the wound to know if Mind's Eye works, and so we need to figure out, exactly how wounds work, exactly how hit zones work, just to figure out how good Mind's Eye really is. So that's what we're going to do in this video. This is strictly a wound video. So, wounds, basically. Very quick introduction. So in general, parts that can be wounded sort of have what I would call 4 states. Right now, there's no marking on the monster whatsoever. So that's what I would call state 1. When I attack the monster a bit, there we go. We get this sort of white marking on the side of the monster. So this is state 2. If I keep attacking the monster, I'll get a wound. And if I keep attacking the wound after that, the wound giving me extra damage, the monster will be scarred, and it can't be wounded again. So the first 3 states all have different HP values that can be seen in data mines, which is very convenient. And if we know these HP states, we know how much damage we can do before and after the wound. So let's go with an example. So in the training dummy, right now, the number and HP thresholds are going to be 50 with no marking, then 50 with white marking, and then 100 with the wound. This value does not carry on. Okay, I'll explain in a second, but basically right now, we can reset the monster by making it face a different direction. And so what's going to happen is, when I do 50 damage, I'll get a white marking. So 1, 2, 3, 53 damage. I got the white marking. And I need to do another 50 damage to create the wound. So the extra 3 damage I did not carry over. So those extra 3 damage is ignored. We're starting from scratch. And now when I attack the monster, 1, 2, 3, yeah, you can see that I hit 48. And now the next one will do 50 damage. Will bring me over 50 damage to create the wound. And now I need to do 100 damage to remove the wound. Now, this value does scale with a monster level. I had a whole video on monster scaling. One of the conclusions are that roughly these values increase by about 50% per sort of difficulty level. So so right now it's a 1-star difficulty, so it's like the actual base values. If I go up to say a 5-star difficulty value over here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 levels higher. Each level is about 50%, so 4 to 50% is 200%. So all these values are going to increase by 200% or multiply by 3 times. So instead of needing 50 damage to cause the wound, it's going to be about 150 per stage. And the final stage, the wounded stage, is going to take around 300 damage before the wound disappears. That's just an approximate. I had more precise values in the other video. So from knowing the monster's hit zone values and the HP both before and after the wound, we could actually calculate a sort of effective hit zone value that takes that all into account. Let's do a quick example. So say we do 100 damage per hit before hit zones. So if we did 400 damage in 4 hits, we're doing 100 damage per hit. We're doing like full damage. So the monster's hit zone is 100. 400 divided by 4. If it took us 10 hits to do 400 damage, we're doing 40 damage per hit. And so we can sort of use the same logic the other way around. We can use our hits and the damage we do to calculate an effective hit zone. The effective hit zone is just the total damage divided by the number of hits. And the total damage is just the HP before the wound plus the HP after the wound. The number of hits is just the hits before the wound and the hits after the wound, right? So if we're doing, again, 400 damage, and we're taking 10 hits, then that's 400 divided by 10. The hit zone is going to be 40. That's all that's in. However, we can we don't know how many hits we're going to do before or after the wound, but we can calculate that, right? We can basically just use the same equation again. Calculate the hits based on the hit zone and the HP. Basically, what this means is that effective hit zone is going to be our HP before the wound plus the HP after the wound, all divided by the HP before the wound divided by the hit zone before the wound plus the HP after the wound divided by the hit zone after the wound. We'll go through an example right now. So in the soft training dummy, or in any case, the HP before the wound is going to be 100, and HP after the wound is going to be 100. 50 plus 50 is 100, and then there's 100 over there. The HP before the wound is again 100, so there's that. And the hit zone before the wound is going to be 80 when it's soft. The HP after the wound and hit zone after the wound are both going to be 100. And so we go 200 divided by 1.25 plus 1, or 88.9. So if I set the dummy to soft and I keep attacking it and stop when the wound is destroyed, on average, my hit zone is going to be around 88.9. Okay? Between the 80 and the 100. Against the hard dummy, instead of 80, it'll be 40. The calculation is otherwise the same. So 200 divided by 2.5 plus 1 is 57.1. So our effective hit zone is going to be 57.1. Not 40, not 100, 57.1. So yeah, we're just sort of taking like a weighted average between the two values, weighted by the monster's HP. Okay, now this is where Mind's Eye comes in. Because even though 57.1 is above 45, because the base hit zone was below 45, that is multiplied by Mind's Eye. So instead of 57.1, it gets multiplied by 1.3 and becomes 74.3 after Mind's Eye. So yeah, with Mind's Eye, the monster's hit zone is basically, on average, going to be 74.3, which is very close to 88.9. Remember, we're starting from 40 versus 80, but in reality, it's 74 versus 89. Like, we went from being like half as strong to being like 90% as strong. Like, it's crazy what Mind's Eye is doing and what taking into account Boons does. As well, what makes this even better is that, this is true if we're just attacking the monster until the wounds disappear. But that's not how we play Monster Hunter, right? Because we're doing things like focus strikes and whatever else. And in practice, we're going to beat that 100 damage value more often than we aren't. And because of that, because we're doing way more damage than we would expect, Mind's Eye becomes even stronger. It can be even better if we sort of time our focus strikes well. If you do a few hits before your focus strike, we basically just cheat and we do extra damage on the wound, more damage than we would expect. And yeah, just look at it in terms of the training dummy, right? Like, what I would do is I would basically do a few extra hits, cause the wound, do like an extra hit or two, and then, go for the focus strike. And this is way more damage. The 600 damage is way more than the 200 damage I calculated before, right? Mind's Eye is boosting our damage way more than even I've shown. If you can play the game properly and do enough damage before the wounds and then focus strike them once they're weak. But yeah, this is crazy. This is insanely good. At least for, the training dummy, where it's perfectly still, you can calculate all the numbers. To figure out how it would work in a real hunt, we need to do a whole lot more. Someone would need to look at every monster part, find out all the hits and values, both with and without the wounds, find out the HP with and without the wounds, find out all the parts where Mind's Eye activates or doesn't, look at every damage type. Like you need to look at both sever and blunt damage for the hammer people. You also need to look at it, before and after part breaks, when the monster is enraged, all of those things. Someone would have to consider all of these things to tell us if Mind's Eye is good or not. So I did all those things to tell you if Mind's Eye is good or not, and this spreadsheet is going to go in the description below. Okay, so this sheet should be in the description below, and I've tried to make it pretty easy to read. So basically, the monster name is on the sheet itself. So say, for example, we have chemistries over here. We have the 3 damage types in the game. Again, there's no weapons where a shot is going to activate, but I put it there for completion. So you have Sever and you have Blunt. 0 means we don't have Mind's Eye, and 1 means that we do have Mind's Eye. Wound count is how many wounds you can have on a part, and stagger is how much damage you do to cause a stagger. Now, in the case of chemistries, we can see that taking into account wounds with a severing weapon, the effective hit zone on the head is going to be 63.3, on the torso it'll be 45.1, the tail will be 65.0, and so on and so forth. With Mind's Eye, these ones some of them are going to increase the damage, and Mind's Eye is going to activate, and it'll give us about a 1.3 times damage modifier. And so, the part that was on average going to be 48.5 is now 63. The part that was on average 47.3 is now 61.5. And in the case of chemistries, what we can see, for example, is that, now, the weakest part is still going to be the head and the tail, 63.3 at 65. However, the foreleg now has a 63 effective hit zone value, which is very close to the other strongest parts. And we can use that to, get staggers off and whatever else. We can look at Ray Dow, which was, I think, what inspired all of this. We can see the hit zone value on the head is, on average, 61.5, taking into account the wounds, which is, the best part. However, the legs activate Mind's Eye, and taking into account the wounds, the hit zone value is 59.8, which is very close to 61.5. In addition to that, look at the stagger threshold. It's 200, so it's very easy to cause a trip on the tail, on the legs, and taking into account the wounds, the legs take just as much damage as the head does. And this is why Mind's Eye was so good against Ray Dow. It also, activated on the torso as well, but the torso is still pretty weak, so we aren't going to consider that. It didn't activate on the tail or the wings. But yeah, so basically the legs went from being like the second weakest part, the second worst part to attack, to being like the best part to attack in terms of like damage, which is crazy. And yeah, so I briefly went through all of these, through all the monsters. I would suggest you look at this more carefully yourself if you're really interested. What I would end up doing is basically I would recommend it for a few monsters. So I'd highly recommend it for some monsters, like Ray Dow, because of the tripping. Like, for example, Balahara. So Balahara over here, the weakest part of Balahara used to be the tail, which has a hit zone of 56.4. With Mind's Eye, we have a new weakest point, the right and left forelegs, which I think is pretty cool. Some I'd softly recommend, so a Gyricon, for example. So when it says state 1, that usually means like enraged, so these are the enraged hit zone values. But so in a Gyricon, for example, Mind's Eye lets you do more damage to the tail, to the legs, which could be good for tripping, but you're still going to want to attack the forelegs for the most damage. So, I'd softly recommend it for Gyricon and a few other monsters. But yeah, so these are going to be the monsters I'd recommend Mind's Eye on. For completion, these are the ones I probably wouldn't. So for example, Gypsaros, if I can find Gypsaros. Where is Gypsaros? So Gypsaros over here. Mind's Eye lets you attack the legs a bit better, which could be good for trips, but the damage on the legs isn't going to be that good, so you're probably still going to want to attack the tail. You also make it easier to attack. You do more damage on the wings, but again, you're probably going to be wanting to attack the tail anyways, and it's not going to be too hard for Gypsaros. So that's why I wouldn't strongly recommend it, but, you could. And there are a few which I just wouldn't recommend. So Blangonga, for example, if I could find Blangonga. So Blangonga over here. So Blangonga just doesn't activate Mind's Eye at all, at least for severing weapons. When I put an asterisk, that just means blunt is probably a bit different. So for blunt, for example, the legs, the entire body activates Mind's Eye, and thus it could be pretty good for the hammer and stuff like that. But yeah, so bottom line, these are my recommendations personally. If you're really curious, check out the sheet yourself and like make your own judgment and judge it on your gameplay. Do you want to hit another part that's easier, even if you lose a bit of damage? I'll let you decide that one. But yeah, I think that is luckily all I really have to say on this topic, on this very long topic. Now again, in general, we do want our strong attacks to be stronger, which Mind's Eye classically hasn't done it, and that's why I look down on it and a lot of other people look down on it. However, one, it has really good numbers. 30% damage bonus is not anything to laugh at. And two, it does enable stronger attacks, even if it's not in itself a strong attack. More knockdowns means easier hits on the head. And also, thanks to runes, it actually does also strengthen our strongest attacks. Getting a 25%, 30% damage attack on your focus strikes, that's crazy. That's a lot of damage there. And thus, Mind's Eye, for very many monsters, ends up being the best choice for a weapon skill. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you so much for watching and for sitting through this intense long video. I'd like to thank all of my patrons as well, especially Jack Bing and Luvolt, highest tier Patreons. A cool thing is, as of today, I am now approved to work on YouTube again. So monetization is back on all of my recent videos that have not been monetized. Thank you all of you so much for being around, even if I don't make money. Wait, I feel like okay. Other news: the Switch 2 is coming out this week, and I will be getting the Switch 2, and I will be playing lots of Rune Factory Gardens of Azuma, which I am very hyped for. This channel really got going from my Rune Factory content, so I probably will be making at least some Rune Factory content. Monster Hunter content will continue every now and then. I still have an intense element video that's in preparation, possibly even longer than this one. But yeah, so if you're interested still, subscribe, and I'll see you around next time. Bye.